Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Bakari Lumumba back once again, the progenitor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. Back once again with a dual stream with Beacon Network, the Pan African social media extraordinaire, the home of African centered news and information. And we have once again another provocative and evocative show tonight, part three of our series, Inside the Nation of Islam, Cult or Community. What comes first, being Muslim or African? If you're watching, family, make sure you hit the thumbs up button. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Make sure you hit the subscribe and notification bell. Once again, you're watching a dual stream, LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe you could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. And of course, Beacon Network, the Pan African social media extraordinaire, the home of African centered news and information. The link is in the description. The link will be in the chat momentarily. Definitely want you all to tap in to be part of the conversation. Many of you may be aware of part one and two of course, our series, Emotev Hiru. Please and blessings, family. Hope you could tap in and be part of the conversation. Where, of course, we discuss one, of course, the Nation of Islam, the history of the Nation of Islam in part one, some of the nefarious issues that many may be unaware of. And then, of course, part two dealt with the, many would argue, quixotic teachings of the nation as well. So part three, we're asking the question where we're looking to discuss identity. Of course, what comes first, being Muslim or African. We see here, I want to eat your belly. This title alone is highly offensive. Cult is short for culture. Islam and Arab culture are two different things. Arabs don't own Islam. A cult is not short for culture. That's a nice play on words there. However, I think one of the issues we need to look at that even though Arabs do play a significant role in, of course, the codifying and collating of Islam even to this day. So even though they may be the numerical minority in terms of ethnicity, they are the preeminent group in terms of the brain trust regarding Islam. And we've gone over that on some previous, of course, on part one and two, citing the work of course, Dr. Malefic Santi and, of course, Dr. Ali Missouri, providing the family an African-centered critique of the Islamic faith, right? And so we've even done a show on, of course, are Abrahamic religions tantamount to menticide for African people. So definitely just want to make you all aware of that. But family, once again, tap in and be part of the conversation. I've put the link in the chat. And of course, the link is in the description. So once again, part three of course, our three-part series, Inside the Nation of Islam, Cult or Community. What comes first, being Muslim or African? Tap in and be part of the conversation. Once again, we're discussing part three, keyword part three of our show, Inside the Nation of Islam, Cult or Community. What comes first, being Muslim or African, right? So definitely want you all to tap in and be part of the conversation. You're watching a dual stream, once again, with LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe that we can gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. And, of course, the Beacon Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire, and the home, keyword, the home of African-centered news and information. And information, we know it's a hump day, unfortunately, but we're halfway through the week. Also, want to make sure that we take some time to, express our condolences, to what took place and transpired in Georgia. I mean, many of you may be aware of the unfortunate shooting. Two students and two teachers were, of course, deleted at Alapache High School in Winder, Georgia. I think it's about 50 miles northeast of Atlanta, downtown Atlanta, 25 miles west of Athens, Georgia, the home of course, University of Georgia. The suspect was a student. Faces murder charges, was 14 years old. And this is fresh out the presses from the New York Times. At least 9 people were injured. 14-year-old student opened fire at his Georgia high school on Wednesday, killing 2 students and 2 teachers before surrendering to school resource officers, according to the authorities, who said the suspect would be charged with murder. Students barely a month into the new school year. Once again, barely a month into the new school year at Apalachee High in Winder, Georgia, described their terror as a lockdown that they initially thought was a drill, turned out to be anything but. They said they heard gunfire and barricaded themselves in classrooms, then later fled to the football field to reunite with anxious parents. I can definitely understand parents coming after receiving that type of news. The attack, which also injured 8 students and a teacher, stoked fear and anguish in Winder, a city of roughly 18,000 people in the exurbs of Atlanta, as the community grappled with a burst of violence that the local sheriff described as pure evil. The latest, of course, is that the suspect gave up and got on the ground. The officials said the 14-year-old, who they identified as Colt Gray, will be prosecuted as an adult. The shooting was the deadliest episode of school violence in Georgia history and prompted an outpouring of sympathy and outrage. President Biden, in a statement, lamented the attack as another horrific reminder of how gun violence continues to tear our communities apart. Many in Winder were still waiting to learn the identities of those injured and killed. The authorities have not yet named any victims, although they plan to provide an update later on Wednesday. Extremely unfortunate event. I'm quite sure that for all of us we're sensitive to the loss of life. Once again, and they say this was a hate-filled shooting, and so my presumption would be that this may have been a young white male who was seeking to attack, of course, people of color, and I wouldn't be surprised if this was an actual planned attack, of course, maybe even on African people in America. So definitely want to just get some time to discuss the latest on that unfortunate news that we received, of course, early this afternoon. Actually took place early this afternoon while I was at work. We received the information. And so once again, we're sensitive to the loss of life that took place there. And it still shows, unfortunately, that, people are seeking to solve problems with violence. And I think this is also a reflection if, of course, the shooter, whose name purports to be someone who was of European descent, are coming to grips with the fact that they're soon will no longer be the dominant majority population group in America. So that, of course, is something that we want to definitely be conscious of, cognizant of, and ever vigilant that, we live in a violent society. We know this is the country. Many people are as why is there so much violence in this country, particularly gun violence. And I argue that the origins of this nation, of course, was rooted in violence, genocidal violence against, of course, Native Americans, then, of course, and violence, state violence, not only against the indigenous peoples of this land, but also against African people, what we call chattel enslavement and the dehumanizing of the African man, woman, and child. So definitely something that we need to be aware of, cognizant of, and ever vigilant of the fact as what the late, great African-American Renaissance man, Paul Robeson, taught us. And that is that the battlefront is everywhere. There is no sheltered rear. So appreciate you all allowing me to lament, unfortunately, on this unfortunate act of violence here in America, in Georgia. Once again, the exurb of Georgia, Winder, Georgia, town of 18,000. But we want to try to, lift our spirits once again, shift back to, of course, the topic for today's show. And that is, of course, part 3 of our series, Inside the Nation of Islam, Cult or Community. Part 3, what comes first, being Muslim or African? Once again, family, the link is in the description. The link is in the chat. If you're watching, make sure you hit the thumbs up button. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. And make sure you hit the subscribe, and hit the notification bell. You're watching a dual stream here on LumumbaSpeaks.com and, of course, Beacon Online Network, the home of African-centered news and information. And we're seeking to have a conversation regarding part 3 of Inside the Nation of Islam, Cult or Community. What comes first, being a Muslim or African? We are aware that part 1 of our show, we really open up on some of the history of the Nation of Islam, some of the financial dealings of the nation, and then, of course, some of the unknown and oftentimes nefarious activities that the organization has engaged in. We then, of course, pivoted to part 2, where we discussed the quixotic, to say the least, teachings of the Nation of Islam that many would argue the Nation of Islam teaches knowledge of self. But under further examination, we find that the nation actually teaches what could be called ahistorical narratives regarding Black history. And so here we are at part 3. which of course is asking the question, what comes first, being Muslim or being African? So definitely, family, we want you all to tap in, be part of the conversation this evening. Um, Once again, September 4th, 2024. So we are really flying through 2024, and we definitely want to do everything that we can in the way that we can to move forward in terms of creating a Pan Africanist frame of reference where wherever we are in the way that we can, we're working to improve not only the lives but also material conditions of African people. So once again, family, the link is in the chat. The link is in the chat. The link is in the description. So tap in, be part of the conversation. Once again, you do not have to use your actual name. You can use a pseudonym to be part of the conversation, and you don't have to cam up. I know Emotep Huru, you tapped in. Hope you could be part of the conversation. But once again, you do not have to use your actual name. You can use a pseudonym, and you do not have to cam up to be part of the conversation. So we're definitely looking forward to hearing from our brothers and sisters and having a great conversation this evening. I think we had a great conversation actually on Sunday on our show where we discussed Trinidad and Tobago. We know the Trin Island nation just north of Venezuela deciding to remove Christopher Columbus's ships from their coat of arms, right? So we had a great conversation about Trinidad and Tobago, which many would argue, including myself, has produced more Pan-Africanists per capita than one can think of, right? But I haven't actually looked at the data, but I think just from a suggestive glance, we would take that position. So, of course, we're back here today on Wednesday. We definitely want to have a great conversation this evening. Then we'll be back once again on Sunday, where there was a sister who came on, I think pro-woman. She said that's because she's proactive, professional, prolific, right? And so we're going to have a conversation about really examining the efficacy of higher education for African Americans. So that show will be titled, Does Higher Education Matter for the Black Community? We know I had a conversation with a brother, brief conversation via text message, where he shared that he's looking to go back to school, right, and really be to develop some hard skills so that one would have a career where they're able to, of course, provide in a meaningful manner for not only themselves but their family. So definitely look forward to having that show on Sunday. Hope that you all could tap in and, of course, be part of that conversation. But today, here on Wednesday, September 4th, 2024, we want to have a conversation regarding part 3 of our dynamic introspective series, Inside the Nation of Islam, Cult or Community. Part 3, what comes first, being Muslim or African? So tap in, family, be part of the conversation. We'll look forward to hearing from you all this evening on LumumbaSpeaks.com. Once again, a Black Empowerment Initiative where we believe you could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. And of course, Be Line Network, Pan-African Social Media Extraordinaire, and the home family, the home of African-centered news and information. So without further ado, family, the link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Tap in and be part of the conversation. You could just give your perspective on what you believe to be the case. But before we do that, definitely want to make sure that we go over some of the ground rules here at Line Network and, of course, Lumumba Speaks. So first and foremost, as many of you are aware who are regular subscribers and tuning in, diversity of thought is welcome here. So irrespective of you on the left, you're on the right, or you're right down the middle, you can come here and be part of this conversation. Number 2, no racial epithets are allowed. In fact, no epithets of any kind are allowed. And that's for a reason, right? This is a space of Black empowerment. We believe in the 3 N's of Black power, which are, of course, self-respect, self-defense, and, of course, self-determination. And so we don't allow epithets of any kind on this platform. Number 3, facts over feelings, family. So we want to make sure that if you have an argument and you disagree with someone, that you attack that person's opinion, that person's argument, and of course not the person themselves. Then, of course, last but not least, no fundamentally false statements. So you can't state that Michael Jordan only won two NBA championships. He won 6. So we want to stay away from fundamentally false statements. As you all know, this is my platform, and I am responsible for the information that is disseminated on my platform, right, wrong, or indifferent. And of course, last but not least, our mission is neither to exonerate or vilify, but to challenge conventional wisdom and re-examine what has previously been accepted as fact. So with that being said, family, the airways are open. The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Tap in and be part of the conversation. Part 3 of our introspective in the evocative series, Inside the Nation of Islam, Cult or Community. Part 3, what comes first, being Muslim or African? The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Let's get this conversation started. Ashe, Black Power. Ashe, Black Power. I think I got somebody. Okay. Um, let's see here. Mm-hmm. All right. So let's see if we can get some people here. Yeah, okay. All right. So yes, family. The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Tap in and be part of the conversation. Absolutely. Absolutely. So definitely want to hear what people have to say. I know there's a brother who posted on another site talking about Islam is a cult created by terroristic, genocidal maniac, perpetuated by ignorant man with superiority complex and desire to dominate and abuse women. Based on Sumerian moon god, Muhammad was a brutal dictator and conqueror. There's no place as a person to be admired or worshipped. So we see there's some rather strong feelings for some people, of course, on Facebook, but hopefully, once again, they could tap in and be part of the conversation here in the live. Definitely want to hear what people have to say. Inside the Nation of Islam, cult or community, what comes first, being Muslim or African, right? And so we know that nation typically is an organization that is pedestalized in the Black community. Much of that, I think, is due to mystery. We also see that they provide an ethos, at least a visual effect of discipline, clean cut, which is important. But we know that one of the positive teachings of the Nation of Islam is that it teaches that one should be cognizant of course, of their appearance. But also Malcolm X. You know, Malcolm X is a polarizing figure for some, but extremely charismatic, well spoken, and well read individual that was even considered a statesman by some, and of course one of the preeminent African Americans that have ever lived. So a lot of that plays a role into, of course, the mystique and of course the prestige of the Nation of Islam. But once again, we look to do a deeper dive in our 3-part series and uncover, you know, not only some of the teachings of the Nation of Islam, but also the reasons why Malcolm X left the Nation of Islam and created his own secular organization, the Organization for African American Unity, which of course was modeled after the Organization for African Unity, which is now known as the African Union. And I think we may even want to do a show on examining the efficacy of the African Union, which of course we know in many circles has been considered a toothless bulldog. We also, family, are in talks to actually touch base with Sister Farida, who of course is a Pan-Africanist activist from the Togo. And we're going to do a show on why, of course, the 9th Pan-African Conference is not Pan-Africanism. So for those of you who, of course, are not in the know, this is something I think that we need to be aware of. Many of us are familiar with the first Pan-African Congress that took place, of course, in 1900 at the leadership or behest of Henry Sylvester Williams. And of course, afterwards, of course, subsequent Pan-African conferences took place as it was at the leadership of W.B. Du Bois. But the 9th Congress, of course, is an issue that I think we need to be cognizant of in terms of the Togolese government, which is extremely oppressive, working to actually promote Pan-Africanism as a way to turn people, deflect people's attention to the oppressive policies, of course, that they have in the country. So with that said, family, those are some of the shows that we have coming up. But tap in, family. The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. You know, I could talk all day ad nauseum, but I definitely want to hear from you all rather than hear myself speak. So tap in, be part of the conversation. Here, you're watching once again a dual stream with, of course, LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we can gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. And of course, Beacon Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire, the home of African-centered news and information, where we're discussing part 3 of our provocative and introspective series, Inside the Nation of Islam, Cult or Community, part 3, what comes first, being Muslim or African. The link is in the description. You can come tap in and be part of the conversation. You do not have to cam up, family. Keyword is you do not have to cam up. And then, of course, the link is in the chat as well. So you have access to be part of the conversation. You can use a pseudonym. You do not have to use your actual name. And you can use, and you do not have to cam up if you want to, of course, protect your identity Tap in, be part of the conversation, family. We're looking to hear from you all this evening, uh, Sep- September 4th. It's about almost 8:30 here on the East Coast. So definitely tap in, family. Looking forward to hearing from each and every one of you this evening as we ask the question, what comes first, being Muslim or being African? Of course, we use the term African as synonymous for Black, even though some people do take umbrage for that, but we understand that being African means Black, right? And being Black means you're African. So we don't make any issues there. But once again, family, the link is in the description. The link is in the chat. We want you all to tap in, be part of the conversation. And of course, we're asking the question inside the Nation of Islam called the community, what comes first, being Muslim or being African? This, of course, is part 3 of the, of course, evocative and introspective series inside the Nation of Islam here at LamumaSpeaks.com and, of course, Beacon Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire. So I know many of you may be really settling in for the night. Um, work, children, of course, even make sure you got a dinner in. But and many of you may even be trying to make sense of course, the horrible news that we received earlier this afternoon from Georgia, right, an hour east of Georgia. There was unfortunately a horrific school shooting that took the lives of 2 students and 2 teachers and wounded 9 others, 8 students and 1 teacher, unfortunately. And so we definitely, want to make sure that our concerns, our hearts, and of course, for many of you who do pray, prayers go out to the families, of course, who have been victimized by this census act of violence. 14-year-old was, of course, the perpetrator. 14-year-old was the perpetrator. Initial reports from the sheriff's department is that the young man will be charged as an adult. So we definitely want to do everything that we can to really, hold our young people near and dear to us and let them know that violence is not the way to solve problems, particularly in high school or middle school, right? There's simply something that we don't see. And I can't imagine anyone sends their children out to school and does not expect them to come home, right? So definitely, family. With that said, tap in, family. The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. We part 3 of our series. What comes first, being Muslim or African? We can't have a great show unless you all tap in. So we definitely need you all to tap in and give your perspective. Once again, you do not have to use your actual name. You can use a pseudonym. You can, keyword can. You do not have to cam up either. So definitely want you all to tap in, be part of the conversation, and answer the question. Of course, do you believe? What comes first, being Muslim or being African, when we talk about the Nation of Islam? Once again, I know there were some individuals who provided a critique of my first show and said that, why don't you reach out to Wesley Muhammad? Once again, I did reach out to Wesley Muhammad. I reached out to him on Twitter, if I recall correctly. I reached out to him on Instagram, sent him a message, and I even reached out to him on his website, right? So it's unfortunate, but I did that. I reached out to him, and as one of the brothers stated, you're not going to hear back. So unfortunate. I don't think members of the nation like to be challenged, particularly intellectually, by people that they believe are their equal, or are able to even provide a semi-coherent retort to many of the claims that they make. I know there was an individual who had claimed that the nation engages in a prison ministry. I would argue many organizations engage in prison ministries, but I would argue it's not more so a ministry rather than actually a term that we typically use when someone is trying to take advantage of someone, like predatory type behavior, because they're preying on people who, of course, are ignorant. They aren't well read, aren't well versed in history, and able to be easily manipulated. So that, of course, is my perspective. So definitely tap in, family, be part of the conversation where we want to discuss, of course, part 3 of our introspective and evocative series inside the Nation of Islam called the community. What comes first, being Muslim or African, right? And so definitely, family, the link is in the description. Keyword, the link is in the description. And of course, the link is in the chat. The link is in the chat. Tap in and be part of the conversation this evening, where we're discussing what comes first, being Muslim or African. We do know that from a Pan-Africanist perspective, your African identity is preeminent. It's the most salient identity that one has, and nothing, of course, supersedes that. Unfortunately, what we're finding is, I actually had a question that was asked me by one of the brothers on the job. he said, well, why is it that we tend to not be able to unify? And I said, well, I would argue in part is due to our adherence to alien ideologies. And right, he kind of was blown back by that. So when we're fighting with each other over, of course, concepts that were introduced to us by our oppressors, right, both near and far. So definitely something to consider, something to, of course, really get your mind around. But family, once again, I want you all to tap in, be part of the conversation this evening. The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. If not, we're going to close out. Don't want to close out, but definitely want to have a great conversation this evening. What comes first, being Muslim or being African? The link, once again, is in the description. The link is in the chat. So tap in and be part of the conversation this evening. What comes first, family? What comes first? Being Muslim or being African? If not, we're going to close out in a few minutes, but hopefully, if not you all on here today, and of course you'll be back on Sunday where we're discussing the efficacy of higher education for the Black community. What does higher education matter? That's a show that we're going to have on Sunday. We're going to try to stream at least 2 times a week on Sundays and of course Wednesdays. So definitely hope that you all could tap in and be part of those conversations here at LumumbaSpeaks.com. Of course, a Black Empowerment Initiative where we believe we gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black, and of course Beacon Line Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire, and the home of revolutionary African-centered news and information. I would give my opinion, I would argue, based on what I've read, right, from the Nation of Islam, the writings of course, Elijah Muhammad, where, of course, he has a very negative, very virulent anti-African impulse, where he's even stated that, I think it was in The Fall of America, that the only civilized people in Africa were Christians and Muslims, that in the Nation of Islam, what comes first is to be Muslim, not to be African. And we do know that the Nation of Islam took some heat when Umar Johnson stated, I believe on a radio broadcast or one of his numerous speaking engagements, the Nation of Islam was not about that life when it came to Pan-Africanism. Of course, the nation tried to rebrand, where for about maybe a 6-week period, they decided to, of course, adorn many of their podiums with, of course, red, black, and green flags. But of course, that was temporary. That was a temporary hiatus from their normal way of doing things. So once again, family, the link is in the description. The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Tap in, be part of the conversation. You do not have to cam up. You do not, keyword, you do not have to use your actual name. You can use a pseudonym. And let's close out this 3-part series the right way by, of course, answering the question, your opinion, what comes first? Being Muslim or African. So Joanne Turner Allen states your faith should always come first. So Joanne, tap in and let's unpack that. So you stated your faith should always come first. The link is in the description. Tap in and let's unpack why you believe that is the case. Joanne Turner Allen. So definitely want you to tap in, Sister Joanne, and let's unpack why you believe your faith should come first and why you believe that would be beneficial for the African community. So we're kind of opening up this question, right? We kind of have an open-ended question. And so I definitely want to hear your perspective on why one's faith should come first. Once again, sister, you do not have to use your actual name and you do not have to come up to be part of this conversation. So I want to hear from you. Yeah, even if you're going to only be on 15, 20 minutes, but I definitely want to hear what you have to say regarding why one's faith should come first. Once again, family, if you believe your faith should come first, put a 1 in the chat. Put a 1 in the chat if you believe your faith should come first. Put a 2 in the chat, family, if you believe that your African identity should come first. So 1 for faith, 2 for African. So if you believe your faith should come first, put a 1 in the chat. If you believe that your African identity should come first, put a 2 in the chat. So definitely want to hear from you, Sister Joanne Turner Allen. So LMA says 2. Okay, LMA he's here rocking with us. And of course, but sister, I want to hear your perspective. I think this is something that would allow us to have a great conversation. So definitely want to hear from you. So tap in, sister. The link is in the description. But LMA, I forgot. That's right. LMA is of course an atheist. But I think this is so P.39 says religion comes first. So definitely P.39, I need you to tap in, be part of this conversation so we can really try to unpack why And the reason I'm asking this question is because we know there have been numerous Pan-Africanists who were religious. Malcolm X, of course, Muslim, Marcus Garvey, Christian, I even believe Roman Catholic. But they understood that they lived in a world where they needed to be race first, where Pan-Africanism was, of course, the modus operandi and the best way to address the issues that African people face at home and abroad. And so that's why I want to have this conversation, right? So tap in, be part of the conversation, and discuss Sister Joanne Turner Allen and, of course, P.39, why one's faith, why one's religion should supersede one's racial or ethnic identity. So definitely, once again, tap in, be part of the conversation. I need to hear from you all. I need to hear from you all. Could be a great conversation. Tap in and be part of the of the combo. I'm sorry. Tap in and be part of the combo. So definitely want to hear from you all. Definitely. I think that obeying the commandments of God outweigh everything. So P.39, I need you to tap in. That's an interesting perspective. I would presume that you're referring to the 10 Commandments. However, history shows that the 10 Commandments come from the 42, of course, laws of Ma'at, of course, which was a moral code in ancient Egypt. So the concept and idea of these concepts or commandments coming from God is, of course, mythological and not, of course, rooted in actual history. So, okay, very good. Says, you're Muslim. So once again, tap in, be part of the conversation, and let's unpack why faith or religion should supersede one's, of course, racial or ethnic, or of course, in this case, African identity, right? We need to understand that. We know we've had some conversations before when we did a show on the African-centered critique for Abrahamic religions, that unfortunately, what we tend to find is brothers and sisters who are adherents practitioners of Islam would then justify the genocidal wars of aggression against African people simply because African people at the time were Muslims. And so definitely want to have a conversation there, right? So definitely want you to tap in and be part of the convo. Once again, Sister Joanne Turner Allen, need you to tap in, need you to tap in, need you to tap in. I mean, you started this off, and so we want to have a great conversation this evening. And so once again, you do not have to cam up, and you do not have to use your actual name. You can use a pseudonym, but definitely want to hear from you regarding why. The key word is why you believe your faith should always come first. Many would argue that that's one of the major issues in the Black community, particularly the individuals who are practitioners of these Abrahamic religions go through a process of self-abnegation where they're distancing themselves from their own history, heritage, and culture to so-called get closer to God. And so this, of course, can open up a Pandora's box, but we want to have a great conversation this evening. So definitely tap in, family. If you're watching, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, as well as the notification bell. You're watching, of course, a dual stream this evening on YouTube, LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we can gain a competitive advantage for always betting on Black. And of course, Beacon Line Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire, the home of course, African-centered news and information. P.39 says, in Islam, there is no race. Muslims believe Allah spread mankind in all parts of the earth so that we can know each other, no colors better than the other. Well, that's rather interesting, P.39, but what we find is there's a virulent history of anti-Blackness in Islam since its inception, right? So we know that is the narrative that's spread, but there is a long history of anti-Blackness in Islam, ranging from the inception, of course, of the religion. One of the greatest examples is that, of course, Bilal, of course, who was the first caller of prayer, of course, was Prophet Muhammad's slave. Of course, many would argue that even Islam is in some aspects more anti-Black than Christianity because, of course, Jesus the Christ, as he was known or called by, of course, Christians all over the world, did not have a Black slave. So once again, I think you're conflating a narrative with actual history. Once again, there is a long and virulent history of Islam, anti-Blackness in Islam, even the concept of the Abid. Okay, Abid, of course, which of course is used towards Black people in the Islamic world, and of course means slave. And so we see that there's still been, of course, matter of fact, many scholars even argue that the concept of chattel enslavement, of course, this concept of the dehumanization of African people, of course, began with the Arab enslavement of African people. Now, this was something that Arab Muslims taught to Europeans, right? And there is a large amount of historical data to actually substantiate that claim. So once again, something to be cognizant of. But you said mothers are perfect. No one says anyone has to be perfect. We're just simply addressing anti-blackness in the Islamic faith. And of course, we don't want to be Muslim apologists, right? So LMA says, I wonder if Black people understood how their ancestors came in contact with these religions, but that changed their opinion on which should come first. That's something, I actually had a conversation. Well, once again, P.39 need you to tap in and be part of the conversation, because what we're referring to, of course, is chattel enslavement, right? We're talking about chattel enslavement, and we're talking about anti-Blackness in the Islamic faith. So I think you're moving the goalpost here, right? We're talking about anti-Blackness. We find in the Islamic enslavement of African people, Black women, unfortunately, were enslaved for the mere purpose of being concubines. We know that African slaves were paid, they paid less money for African slaves. We know that African slaves were forced to work more labor intensive jobs. We know Black men were made eunuchs, right? All of this as a dehumanizing apparatus, right? And so once again, we talk about anti-Blackness in the Islamic faith. Many people are unaware of these things, and so many would argue that you're simply an enemy of Allah, right? And that you are a hater of course, Prophet Muhammad. But no, this is just actual history that's verifiable. In fact, when we look at the history of the enslavement of African people by non-African people, the basis for that enslavement was because we were not practitioners of an Abrahamic faith. We were not what was called, of course, from an Abrahamic standpoint, people of the book, right? So that is something to, of course, consider. We discuss some of the apocryphal claims in Abrahamic faiths in terms of Abraham being the first to practice monotheism and believe in one God. That is something that's ahistorical. We know historically that the first person that we know of to be a practitioner of monotheism was Pharaoh Akhenaten. We know Pharaoh Akhenaten was a Black man. His mother was Queen Tiye of Nubia. And so, yes, we even find, in Imhotep Haru, that, of course, Prophet Muhammad did make very anti-Black comments about African people, right? And this is, I believe, in the Hadith, right? And we did a show, once again, on anti-Blackness and the Abrahamic faiths, particularly Islam. And when this was something that was discussed, we actually even have the Hadith behind it. We reported out and read it for ourselves. So this may be an issue where you may be a bit ignorant, of course, on the history of the faith. So, but once again, family, you all are watching, you all are dialoguing in the chat. Greatly appreciate that. But let's bring the dialogue, of course, to the channel, to the show. So once again, family, I'm going to put the link in the chat, and then of course you all can tap in, be part of the conversation. You do not have to cam up, keyword, you do not have to cam up. And of course, you can use a pseudonym to protect your identity. So tap in, family. And if you're watching, make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button on both channels, of course, LumumbaSpeaks.com and Beacon Network. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Subscribe and hit the notification bell for future updates and videos. You're watching part 3 of our introspective and evocative series, Inside the Nation of Islam, Cult or Community. Part 3, what comes first, being Muslim or African? So the link is in the description, family. The link is in the chat. Tap in, be part of the conversation this evening. If not, we're going to have to check out. Don't want to do that. So definitely, please, if you can, what hadith and who narrated the hadith against Black people? The best witness is the one who shows his proofs. Many of the hadiths were written by his last wife, his youngest wife. I think it's Aisha was her name. Of course, he married her when she was about 6 or 7, then consummated the marriage when she was 9, according to the hadith. And I think that in itself is extremely problematic. And from a modern standpoint, that would be considered pedophilia. But yes, so that is the situation there. But once again, family, if you haven't read the hadith, this is even something that you could Google. You could Google it, and then of course it'll take you straight to the number, and you could read it for yourself. So there's even I think there was a brother who tapped in, Brother Daniel Omawala, that talked about I think it's in chapter 6 of the Quran, where it talks about that people with Black faces would go to hell, right? And so we actually read that live, of course, on the live, right? And so if you want to go back and review part 2 of our series, you would be able to find that information on the live. We don't want to, of course, rehash things that we've already covered. But once again, brother, you may be unfortunately misinformed. So once again, family, tap in. The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. This is part 3 of our series, and we're just asking the question: what comes first, being Muslim or being African? Um, so yeah, just tap in, be part of the conversation. I'm gonna see if I can grab my copy of the. Oh, here we go. Um, so this is my copy of the Hadith right here. So that just want to make you aware of that. So you say they are authentic Hadith and weak Hadith, but I have it right here. And then of course we was even quoting, of course, chapter 6 of the Quran as well, where it states that black people would go to hell. But people with black faces would go to hell. Maximus, as far as I know, all man-made religions are trash. Africans didn't believe in fake men in the sky. Oh, understood, brother, understood. And so if you could answer this question, Brother Maximus, definitely you could tap in and be part of the conversation. But the question is, what should come first, one's faith or one's African identity? So definitely, brother, definitely, if you could answer that question, what should come first? I'm gonna put that question in the chat. What should come first? Faith, or right. So the question is in the chat, family. What should come first, faith or African identity? So that's the question that we're putting out there, family. Definitely want to hear from you all. Let us know what you think. What should come first, faith or African identity? So tap in to be part of the conversation. Mr. Sandman is here. What's the word, brother?
Hey, what's the word? Yeah, yeah. So hello, can you hear me? Hello.
Mr. Sandman, go right ahead, Mr. Sandman.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my bad. Yeah. So the question today is, what comes first, either being a Muslim or being African?
Yes, so, but we've even expanded it to what should come first, one's faith or one's African identity.
Wow. Yeah, that's a hard question to answer because they say like if you're truly devoted to a God, that the God is supposed to come before everything. You know,
Yes,
but
sir.
if you don't believe in God, then I guess you would choose your being African if you're of African descent.
Right,
But
but we find Africans who do believe in God, but they still would what their African identity came first. We think of one Martin Delaney, we could think of one Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, right, so on and so forth. So we see that has not been an inhibitor of individuals who hold being African dear.
well, I think maybe what's the issue with some of these Abrahamic religion is a lot of the pictures that are attributed to the leaders of those religions are like people of a different race. So,
Yes,
like,
sir.
say if you wanted to be a follower of Muhammad in Islam, and you made Muhammad a African man, would you say you're being African first if you followed Islam, if Muhammad was considered black?
But now you're just falsifying history, so that makes it even worse, right? Because now instead of actually, and we find this even with a lot of people who are black people who are Christians, where they just falsify history. So we're just going to say, okay, Mr. Wright, you're in. You don't have to cam up. You could turn your camera off. Um, but yeah, they would just falsify history and then say, oh, hey, guess what? Muhammad is black, Jesus is black. So it's something, of course, to be cognizant of. Zongo Native, I see you're tapping in, brother. What's the word?
Greetings to you, your humble state. Me?
Yes, sir. Mr. Wright, what's the word? Talk to me.
Hey, fellas, how y'all doing?
Doing quite all right.
What
What's
is
up?
the discussion about tonight?
Yeah, so we opened up a little bit, and the question is, what should come first, one's religious faith or one's African identity?
Okay, very good, very good.
So I would say I had to like join the stream just to support the show, right? Because I heard you like saying like you wanted people to give their perspective, right? So I would say like it kind of like really like depends on the environment, right? Let's say like someone like me growing up in Ghana, whereby the environment, everybody's the race is homogenous. So like the race do not really hold much prominence within that environment. What really holds much prominence is really like your faith, your values, and what you really uphold, right? And this is why like if you go to certain communities within uh something like the West African I mean, I would say like communities, right? You have seen a situation whereby the faith has united or brought like different tribes or different groups.
Well, hold on, real quick. We use the term ethnic groups here at Lumumba Speaks.
Yeah, that's what I said. Did I say tribe or ethnic
Yes,
group?
you said tribe. Yes.
Oh, I meant to say like ethnic groups, right? What the faith has united different ethnic groups regardless of their ethnic affiliation. So there has been some sort of like benefit that the faith has brought to those communities within the region where they find themselves. I mean,
Well, so
however,
let me ask you this
however,
question. What let me ask, so they were united to do what?
I mean, they were under the same banner. They coexisted together and they practiced the same faith together. I mean, they
Right,
recognize,
right. But I'm saying to do what? To practice the faith,
yeah, to
or
practice,
to
yeah,
actually do what?
to practice the faith, pretty much.
Well, but that is of no benefit to African people, because, and I'm gonna tell you why. One, when we talk about these alien religions, particularly Abrahamic religions, um, in order to actually be a true adherent to these religious beliefs, you have to you also have to engage in self-abnegation, where you distance yourself from your own history, heritage, and culture. Another aspect of these Abrahamic faiths is that as a result, people tend to engage in racial deference, and they tend to view other people's, non-African people, non-Black people's mythology and history and culture as what? Preeminent and closer to God than their own. So it actually
Mm.
is a rather extremely self-hating apparatus.
I mean, that's really understandable point of view, but like I'm saying that the faith has brought some sort of like benefit to those people in that region. Um,
Okay,
recognizing
so
this,
so the question is, what tangible
Mr.
benefit did it provide?
Mr. Wright, can you mute your mic?
Yeah, we need you to mute your mic real quick. So, but what tangible benefit did it provide to African people? Because we also know, and I would presume you're speaking of Christianity, yes?
Not really Muslims.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. So, what tangible benefit did it provide? Because we're seeing the issues that Islam has in Africa, particularly in terms of Islamic extremism. We could talk about the
No,
subjugation of
really, not
women.
really. You have to understand, like within the African cultures, and I don't want to generalize. I'll speak specifically in the case of West African cultures, right? Uh, all the ethnic groups, their level of civilization wasn't the same.
I
So,
am aware of that.
to some ethnic group, Islam helped to upgrade their civilization.
How
To
so?
some ethnic group, it helped brought some writing system into their cultures. Like you can look at a culture like the Hausa people, like the one of like the
House of
most
Fulani. And they
uh,
were writing in what? Arabic
no
or their own language?
no the Hausa. They're the one of the most the populous ethnic group in West Africa, right?
Mhm.
And the earliest writing system was written. They use the Arabic letters. I don't know the Arabic language, the letters, just like modern English use like the Latin letters to write their language. They use the same Arabic letters to write their language. It's not just only the Hausa people, even the Turkish people.
Well,
The
we're talking about Africa. We're not talking about Turkey. We're talking about African people.
Yeah, I'm just I'm not trying to like deflect, but I'm just saying like if you kind of like look at it in a very objective way, you can also argue that the faith also brought some sort of benefit to those cultures. And I do recognize the fact that the faith will force. I would say will require you to kind of like expurgate certain cultures within your ethnic group that do not align with the faith and retain the ones that aligns
So,
with the
so
faith.
it creates division in the community.
I mean, the ones who wouldn't agree with that ultimately,
Yeah,
yes,
exactly. It creates division. This is an
division.
alien religion that came from outside, right? We've gone over this. So hold on, wait. We've done several shows on this on my platform. We did a show on the African critique of Islam. We did 2 shows on an African critique of Abrahamic religions as a promote menticide in the African community, right? And we've been there the two part. This is the 3rd part series on Inside the Nation of Islam. And so we've even used African-centered scholars, African-centered scholarship to have an African-centered critique of Islam. And that we find that one of the issues is that it's incongruent with the culture. We talked about the concept of female subjugation. We talked about the concept that in traditional African cultures, one uses alcohol not only for weddings, but also point of libation. Alcohol in Islam is considered haram. We know in traditional African societies, you can have as many wives as you can actually care for. And Islam limits it to what? 4. So there are a number of issues, right? The fact that you have to not only pray in Islam, but even there's an expectation. Pray in Arabic, but even write in Arabic. So you're pedestalizing another
No,
language.
not necessarily writing Arabic. No. It's not writing Arabic. It's using Arabic letters to write your own language.
Okay, well that in itself is even problematic.
It's not problematic. It's no different from using Latin letters to write English language. Because
Well, it's problematic if
most
you're not using
most modern languages.
Hold on, wait. You can't overtalk me. Right? The issue is if you're learning someone else's letter system before your own. That is the issue.
But I'm saying most modern languages now are using Latin letters to write their language, including the English language itself.
Yes, but what I'm saying, once again, we'll be very clear, then we're going to bring Mr. Wright in, is that if you're using someone else's, right, alphabet to write your language, many scholars, including Ngugi wa Thiong'o, right, who of course wrote the book on decolonizing the African mind, which I would argue is an African a version of Dr. Carter G. Woodson's The Miseducation of the Negro, makes the same argument, right?
Yeah, the same thing will also be argued for French, English, and several other languages too. Because
this is problematic.
Because even currently, the Hausa language is no longer using the Arabic letters; it's using the Latin letters to write their language now.
I understand that. So we're gonna turn it over to Mr. Wright.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. One of the things you stood out that I thought was a great point was when you made the reference to decolonizing the African mind.
Yes, sir.
And you mentioned before about the 3 Abrahamic religions and its relationship with African people globally throughout history. I think, placing religion above your African identity is very problematic, because, religion was used on Black people globally, right? Obviously to colonize us and to exploit us.
Yes, sir.
When, the Europeans showed up on the African continent, they gave us the Bible and they took the power. And we all know what happened in the Americas in terms of Christianity and Catholicism. But like you said, Bakari, I agree with you. It creates an extreme identity crisis. We start to have an inferiority complex. We start to develop an inferiority complex with a group of people that are telling us what to believe in that has nothing to do with us.
Right.
As an African people.
Very quickly, I don't mean to cut you off because you are cooking, but P.39, you're commenting in the comments. That's great. Tap in and be actually part of the conversation. The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. You're stating that there's no compulsion in Islam. That is what is stated. However, there is a long history of forced conversion in Islam, particularly by African people who were enslaved under Islamic rule. So yes, that is a claim, but that is not congruent. That is adverse to the actual history. Okay. So go. I'm
Yeah.
sorry once again, Mr. Wright, but go right ahead.
Oh, that's okay. I like to make one other point as well. If you look at the three Abrahamic religions, and just about any religion worldwide is considered to be an institution. Am I right? Um, and when you look at it from an institution perspective, their whole goal is to obtain money, wealth, and power. And and African people's relationship to that, we're usually always at the complete bottom, right? In which we support these other religions and we don't get anything out of it, right? So not only are we confused from an ethnic perspective in terms of identity, but economically as well. We're supporting the mosque, the Christian church, and we're just basically giving them our wealth. And we're just sitting there confused. I mean, this has been going on for, a long time, obviously.
Right.
But yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think we should definitely put our African identity before a particular religion. And here's the thing: everyone has a right to practice whatever religion they want to practice.
Right.
But throughout history, everyone has leveraged their race and identity over ours, whether they're Jewish Hebrews, whether they're Muslims, or whether they're white Christians. I mean, in America, we already know the history. White Christians were lynching and hanging us.
Right.
On the continent, right? Do we need to talk about the treatment of African people by Arabs, right? I mean, They were raping our women, castrating the men.
Yeah.
It still goes on today. I mean,
eunuchs, right? Having harems. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, I mean, take a look at what happened in Sudan. I think they have an issue with it today. I think the southern part of Sudan had to separate from the northern part. They weren't technically Arabs, but they take on an Arab identity. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
And you take a look.
I mean, that's a great example.
But the same thing.
Hold on, very quickly. That is a great example when you talk about the identity dysphoria that oftentimes these Abrahamic faiths create.
Right. And one last example I would say would be obviously in the Americas with blacks in the Caribbean, North America, South America, whether it's Protestant Christianity or Roman Catholicism, we tend to wind up at the very end of the spectrum where they usually create a racial caste system. Now, we believe in their religion, worship their God, but we the one that have an identity crisis and wind up at the complete bottom of the racial spectrum, where they put themselves at the complete top. Anything white is right, mixed in the middle, black at the bottom. Now, you have to ask yourself, as an African person, why would you want to support a religion that puts you at the complete bottom?
Great question. Go ahead, Zongo Native.
Yeah, I mean, in the case of Sudan, this is very it's very understandable, right? That if a superior culture comes within your the confines of your community, I mean, there's a likelihood that they will definitely have dominant influence over.
So why would you say superior culture?
I mean, because when I say a spirit culture, because it is the culture that moved from its jurisdiction to come into your region and have influence over the region. Like
that doesn't make it superior.
I mean, as opposed to otherwise, right?
Superior is extremely subjective.
I mean, I'm speaking from that context. Actually, I mean, a culture that has that was able to just migrate within his jurisdiction and have to come to your region and even have influence in that region. I mean, that to me seems like has something like a superiority to me, right? I mean, the same thing applies to English and Western civilization as well, right? I mean, I will lump them all together, right? But I'm not saying that the religion coming within the African societies does not have any disadvantages. There's a lot of disadvantages. Obviously, before the religion was able to have a foothold within the culture or the community, it came with violence actually, and over time, that's how it was able to gain stability within that region, right? I mean, but over time, many people were able to use the religion to promote unity, right? And I was gonna like make another
Well, yeah, they
point.
promoted unity against people who weren't practitioners of their religion. For example, if we talk about, in Islamic society, what we found was that the Muslims actually were running it was that they were engaging in religious gangsterism, where they were making people who weren't Muslim pay higher taxes, paying for
Yes,
protection. It was
yes,
a racket. It was called extortion.
yes. I mean, you have to.
That's nothing to be proud of, and nothing that we should support as African people. Where simply because you don't practice my religion, guess what? Now we're going to extort you.
But I would say like that version of Islam did not, because that's what's like when I'm speaking. I'm not speaking entirety. I'm just speaking just from a West African context, right? I mean, West Africans do practice Islam, but they didn't get a chance to actually practice the religion in the full sense. If I mean, I would say like maybe Nigeria, Sokoto area where like they actually had a like caliphate over there, and in other areas like maybe Senegal, Mali,
So,
and
so
those
what
kind.
do you mean by in its full sense?
I mean, to be able to implement the rules and regulations within the religion in its
So
entirety,
that the rules and
like
regulations of the religion.
like
That
you
would be
highlighted, like if in an ideal Islamic um, a nation, if a non-Muslim exists within, they have to pay tax, and they're not supposed to be part of the military of the nation state, pretty much so on and so forth, right? I mean, that's what I mean by that.
I see.
Yeah,
Mr. Sandman, go right ahead.
I was actually gonna make a different like saying like, however, if you live in society that is heterogeneous, right? Um, then you have to recognize your African identity while maintaining your faith or religious values, whatever you deem fit, because you don't want to um, allow your kids or yourself to be uh, how what was the right term to use, like um, to be played in that like the whole idea like the religion is the only yardstick to guide you or navigating within that environment. In a heterogeneous society, you have to recognize who you are and while maintaining your faith. So I
Well,
think
but that's not what we're saying. We're actually seeing a long history of African people what actually engaging in identity dysphoria, where they're losing their African identity and taking on an Arab-centered identity or a Christian-centered identity. For example, in many parts of Africa, you can't even be a good Christian or Muslim unless you take on an Arab or Christian name.
no, that's not necessarily true. I don't
But
want to speak.
I said in many parts. Hold on. I said in many parts. I mean, I just came from Ghana for crying out loud.
Yeah, but I don't.
That is
I
a
don't want to
reality.
speak for like because I don't know much about Christianity. But I mean, the same thing applies to colonization too. Because a lot of like because
No,
I
no,
come
no,
from.
no, no, no. We're not going to do that. So you're trying to move the goalpost.
No, no, I'm not. I'm not trying
No,
to like.
no, no, no. Zongo, you can't overtalk me. We're talking about religion. We're talking about faith. We're not talking about colonization. We've done shows on that. We just did a show touching on the history of colonization on Sunday. We're talking about faith.
Yeah, I mean, okay. Let me give you an example in the case of Islam because I don't know much about Christianity, right? But in the case of Islam, for instance, right, the names um, that is somehow affiliated with gods, like that's used to practice because you have to the like the, the the Islamic religion, the God of Islamic religion is a very jealous God. He wants you to pray to him alone. So like Islam getting the opportunity to come into the cultures of like West Africa, like the religion instructs you to do away with names that is affiliated with your existing traditional gods
And
and
that and that is problematic.
yeah.
That
However,
once again, it's a problem.
No,
It goes to what I just stated. I just talked about what in terms of identity dysphoria.
yes, yes.
You just made my point.
I'm not trying to like make it stand. I'm just saying. I'm just trying
No,
to.
I already understand. I already know. That's why I'm doing a show on it. I don't talk
I'm
about
just
stuff I don't know
highlighting the
about.
merits and the demerits. Like that's all I'm just saying. I'm just trying to say like, oh, this is where I stand or something like that, right?
No, and what I'm saying is from a African-centered frame of reference that is problematic when you have to give up your African name to take on an Arab name that is considered Islamic. That's a problem.
Yeah, but I'm also pointing out that if your name does not conflict with the tenets of the religion, then you have no choice. You have no reason in just adopting the religious name. You can still maintain your own name.
Right, but once again, this is the point
Mhm.
that I'm making. Is the fact that the religion now was able to decide if your name was okay or not. No, our name is
Yeah.
okay because we're African. African names are okay, irrespective of what any religion says.
Yeah, I'm giving
No,
like
no,
the
no, 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 no. You keep trying to overtalk me. You can't overtalk me on the platform and turn my camera back on. An African name is fine, irrespective of what any religion says, but irrespective of what reason the religion gives. That's the point I'm making. If we're talking about being African centered, being unapologetically proud of who we are, I don't give a damn what the religion is. What we say as African people is what is good and right. I don't give a damn what a religion says. The religion don't get to decide what is good and right. We decide what is good and right for us.
Yeah, that's totally understandable. If you don't embrace the religion, you don't have to comply with the rules of the religion. But I mean, for the most cases, the ones who accept the faith, they are the ones complying with the rules. It's not really.
And then once again, to comply with those rules means to subjugate one's own history, heritage, and culture.
Yeah,
You're
part of it.
making my point for me.
Not entirely part of it. Yes.
Well, but I mean, if it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter in any way. If you're doing it, it's a problem.
Yeah, I mean,
it doesn't matter if you're doing it 50%, 25%, 75%. If you have to subjugate and disabuse yourself of any aspect of who you are as a person, your history, heritage, and culture, that is a problem. It is what is known as self-abnegation. That's a problem. I don't give a damn if it's 2%, if it's 98%. It's a problem.
When it comes to
it's anti.
Yeah, but Lumumba, when it comes to naming, if we want to address these issues holistically, then we can say religion is part of it as well, right? But then not entirely religion. Sometimes a dominant culture could influence you for abdicating your own culture and
But
embracing the
once
culture
again,
of the
you
dominant
keep
culture.
trying to move the goalposts. We're talking about religion right now.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you want to approach this issue of like naming, like holistically, then you can go into deeper depth, not just like entirely religion. I was just highlighting that as well. I'm not trying to change the goalpost.
So real quick, because Brother Hiru, he asked the question, because Idris, if you could turn your camera on in queue very quickly, just gotta make sure you're not scamming, right? You're not trying to play any games, and then I will be able to bring you in. So if you could just turn your camera on in queue, Idris, and then I will bring you into the live, right? Just gotta make sure you're not trolling. But once again, the question is, are you African first or Muslim first? That is the question for Zongo. Okay, I got you, Idris. You can tap in. You can turn your camera off. So that is the question. Are you African first or Muslim first?
Oh, the question was posed to me.
Yes.
I mean, I would say like I'm African while also recognizing my.
No. The question is, are you African first or Muslim first?
I would say based on my response, I'll tilt towards more Africanness though, rather than just the Islamic identity, pretty much.
Are you African first or Muslim first?
I wouldn't say my the way I view things is entirely African, but
that's not what I asked you. I said, are you African first or Muslim first?
I mean, percentage wise, I'm African first. Yes, pretty much. Yes, percentage wise.
Mr. Yeah. Wright, what comes first for you, your faith or your Africanness?
Well, you know me, it's my Africanness comes first and foremost of anything.
Mr. Sandman, what comes first, your faith or your African entity? Mr. Sandman. Mr. Sandman. Okay, maybe having some technical difficulties there. Hopefully we get him back. Jay, what comes first, being African or Muslim?
Being Muslim,
Okay.
because
That,
the reason is, you see, because when you die, the Lord God Almighty is not going to ask you, were you European? Were you African? God's going to ask you, what did you believe in? And what did you do? And how
Hello, can you
pious
hear
were
me
you?
now?
yes, we can hear you
Because
now, Mr. Sandman, but
basically,
Brother Jay is talking.
Okay, my
I
bad.
don't have a choice as to whether I'm going to be white, black, European, African. I don't have that choice. That's outside of my choice. And I'm not going to be judged for something that on the day of judgment I had no choice over.
So well, very quickly, Brother Jay, and I figured you was going to provide that answer, but that is a Islamic frame of reference regarding the afterlife. But here we're focusing on an African-centered perspective.
That's right. So basically, the afterlife, the life of this world will have an impact about what will happen to me in the life of the hereafter.
Based on an Islamic perspective of the afterlife.
Yeah, because basically I want to know what happens to me after I die. So that's why I need religion in my life, I believe.
Okay, so for you being Muslim supersedes being African.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, Mr. Sandman, what comes first for you, your faith or your African entity?
Yeah, my answer is a little bit extended. If you bear with me, I'd like to explain to you the situation that I'm in.
But real quick, brother, first I need a direct answer. What comes first, being African or your faith?
I can't answer that right now at this present time.
Okay, very good, very good. Okay,
Oh, can I give you an extended explanation?
please.
Okay, yeah. So all right. So I've been believing that in the Holy Bible and Christianity and reading the Bible, and I really thought that was the way to go for a long time, because whenever I went through some hardships in life, I could lean on the Holy Bible or the scriptures, and it would give me some guidance, or I felt like it gave me some guidance. But and I was even scared to investigate into some of the original uh, uh, religious practices of our ancestors in Africa, because the Holy Bible or a lot of the Semitic religions are kind of try to lead you to believe in that those other religions are witchcraft or what have you.
Right.
So I so
Very quickly, according to Abrahamic faiths, anything other than practicing the religion of the people of the book is considered witchcraft and devil worship. So, from a religious standpoint, that is the position that those religions take.
yeah, but and then when I started to finally got up the heart to go ahead and start to research it, I was like, well, this religion, this ancient African religion or West African religion is similar to the other religions that they practice in the Semitic faiths or the Abrahamic faiths, or even it was even similar to like some of the Greek mythology. And
Right.
I
Very quickly, Sister Asada Muhammad, you said you're a Muslim, but you're African first. I definitely need you to tap in and come be part of the conversation. So tap in, be part of the conversation, so we could get your perspective on that. Even though you are Muslim, you are African first. And then we back to you, brother Sandman, and then we're going to, of course, bring Brother Maximus' question in here regarding if it's a war, what side are you on? Go right ahead, Mr. Sandman.
Yeah, so basically, I believe that there is a God. And that's the problem. That's the existential problem that I believe that I'm in the middle of. I believe that there's a God. It's just that the truth as to who the God is and what he believes or what he wants us to do here on Earth. I haven't 100% discovered that out
Right.
yet.
Well, let me say this: for the concept that God is singularly a man is something that is alien to African culture. When you study African cultures from antiquity to medieval, even to, of course, the modern or contemporary times, there is a duality, male and female, right? So I think that's something that once again that would be an issue in terms of this concept of the higher power, but you see it as primarily male. Many scholars have made made
Yeah,
argument
but
that that's one of the justifications of course, misogyny, right? Because of this concept that of course, that the God is male. So that is
Also,
something to
can I add
consider as
one?
well.
Can
let
I
me,
ask you one thing?
not all cultures in Africa believe in believe in that manner. You know,
In terms of duality,
yeah, it's duality. I don't think even the Hausa culture, because a lot of people don't really understand like the indigenous Hausa culture. They even like the way their spirituality is more like similar to animalism or something like that.
yeah, animism. Yes, I'm familiar with animism, where there's a belief
Yeah,
that God or the divine is in all living things. But
yeah,
in
yeah,
terms of when we look at particularly in terms of traditional West African religious beliefs, medieval and even classical, there was a belief in duality in terms of there being male and female deities.
yeah. I mean, some cultures, not all of them. That's what I was just saying.
So go
I'm
right
just
Also, I
ahead.
wanted to
Man.
ask you Africa is a huge continent, and
Yes,
I know that we that live over here in the Americas, we're descendants of the West Africans,
yes,
but
West and
the
Central
East
Africa. Yes.
West and Central Africa, but the East Africans, from my understanding, a lot of their practices when you're talking about like indigenous religions that they practice was uh, more Semitic, and I don't believe it. Their Semitic faiths weren't introduced by Arab people.
Well, you actually, well, it depends, right? So when we talk about Ethiopia, right? If I don't know if anyone's ever read the Kimber and the Gospel, but it's very clear that Christianity was introduced to Ethiopia by, of course, Semites, right? If you talk about East Africa, right, and particularly with Swahili speakers, and then of course the proliferation and predominance of Islam in East Africa, that of course came from what Semites via trade along the Indian Ocean. So that is the case.
Oh, it is. So, what was
Yes.
their religion prior to being introduced to those Semitic
Well, once again,
faiths?
in some nations, or you actually had like a state religion. Like in Dahomey, the state religion was what, voodoo. But oftentimes it was just considered a spiritual way of being, in which people, our ancestors respected all living things because of the belief that the divine was in all living things. So we see this concept of the respect for nature, right, which some people call being green. Like I remember when that whole concept of being green came out, many argue, well, they're just trying to be African or take an African-centered approach to respecting, of course, the land.
Right, and then in some Voodoo cultures, right, or the Voodoo religion, sometimes they I don't know if this is true, but do they worship snakes?
I'm sorry.
Do they worship snakes in Voodoo culture?
Well, I mean, the snake was like one of the predominant symbols, right? If I remember correctly, now I have to go back because it's been a little while since I've reviewed the literature. That I think if you and in Dahomey, the Dahomeyan flag had a snake on the flag, right? So the snake was a predominant symbol in Dahomey culture, just like how the bald eagle is predominant here in America.
Well, the reason why I brought that up is because in the Holy Bible, released in the Old Testament, they state that it was a serpent that led, Eve to.
Right, but that's Jewish mythology.
Right. So
Yeah.
how is it? How did it come about? Whereas though they're so juxtaposition of themselves
I
in
I I
indigenous
I
African
couldn't
positions.
I couldn't tell you, but once again, we're talking about Jewish mythology from over 2,000 years ago, and then we're talking about an African nation state from what, the 1700s, right? So once again, there's no connection there. That is what I would just argue is a coincidence. But once again, you have to understand that the story of the snake and the serpent in the Bible is Jewish mythology. It has nothing to do with African people.
Okay, and then well, what about ancient Egypt and the Nubians that were in ancient Egypt? What was their religion?
Well, what I do know is that the preeminent religion in ancient Kemet was Ma'at. The moral code was considered the moral code in ancient Egypt. Many theologians would argue, have argued, that Ma'at was the highest form of religion the world has ever known.
Okay, and did those people worship? What did those people worship?
Well, once again, what I can tell you is that the predominant, or the state religion in ancient Kemet was Ma'at.
Oh, okay. So it doesn't. You don't know if like they had any deities or anything like that?
Well, I mean, there were different deities in ancient Kemet, but we also know that Pharaoh Akhenaten actually changed the religious order in Kemet, and when he became Pharaoh, he he brought Egypt under monotheistic created a monotheistic state religion, and of course, in ancient Egypt. So that's why one of the claims I stated in terms of Abrahamic religions being anti-black, particularly from a historical standpoint, because they're omitting African history by claiming that Abraham was the first person to practice monotheism, when in fact it was, of course, Akhenaten.
Okay. Also, I heard one of the brothers on the panel talking about Islam or Arabic helping people write their languages in that writing system. But I did a little bit of research, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but there were some ancient writing practices in West Africa that preceded, the introduction of the Arab speaking languages that came into West Africa, I believe. And I took a look at it, and it kind of looked like hieroglyphics, or even similar to the way that the Chinese people or the Asian people write their languages, whereas they write symbols as opposed to letters.
Yeah, like symbolic characters. Yeah.
Yeah, in West Africa. Yeah. So what's the problem with us learning our indigenous languages or writing systems where
Uh,
we wrote characters as opposed to using Latin
Yeah,
or
no one has a problem with that at all. Like in Somalia, they use so for the Somali language, they will use both Latin words and they'll also use Arabic words. So basically, I don't know if they use any ancient African words as such. I'm not sure if they've lost that, but so there's no problem in people using different written forms of languages. I mean, no one's going to say, well, it completely.
You mean to say like Arabic letters, or you mean Arabic words?
Arabic letters and
Oh,
changed into like Somalian.
yeah, actually, those letters to characters to write your language. Yeah, that's
Yes,
understandable. Yeah.
characters. Yeah.
So we want to stay focused here. So Brother Maximus asked a question: if it's a war, what side are you on?
a war between what?
African people and Islam.
How can it be African people versus
So
Islam?
I will provide an example, right? So historically, there were wars of aggression, right, by Muslims into, of course, North Africa. So if we could, of course, use the time stone like Thanos and go back to 7th century North Africa, um, would you fight alongside the invading Muslims, or would you fight alongside the Africans who are seeking to defend their land and their culture and religious way of life?
Oh yeah, of course. If there were Arabs that were coming onto my land to rape and pillage us and force us under their rule, of course I would fight
Of course.
uh,
Yeah.
for my ethnic group.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Wright, your answer.
Oh, definitely. I'm going to fight with my people against the Arabs or the European Christians as well.
Very good,
Right.
Mr. Zongo Native.
I mean, the answer is very obvious. Of course, you're gonna fight. You're gonna stay. You're gonna stand with your own people, regardless.
Okay, Mr. J.
Yeah, with me, I would have to go against everybody on this one, and I'd fight on the side of the Islamic peoples.
So you would fight on the side of Islamic people against African people to take and rape and pillage their land.
No, not to rape their land, not to
Well,
pillage.
no, because this is what actually happened. So we're dealing with actual history here. This is what transpired. This is what was done in the 7th century.
When
So
was it
if
done?
you were to side with them, that means that's what you would be doing.
No, I wouldn't be doing that. It would be like an expansion.
No, let him speak. Let him speak.
So basically, I mean, it would be an expansionist war in order to create like a situation, a political situation like the one that Manzar Musa had, that's what you'd want to do. So you'd want to spread Islam into
Right.
Africa.
And so that would be a war of aggression in which you would be seeking to what? Compulse people into what? Forcing people to become Muslim.
No, you're not allowed to force people to become Muslim.
Well, that's what happens when you engage in wars of aggression to expand your political empire under Islamic rule.
Yeah, but Jay, I mean, Jay, we just have to be honest, right? I mean, the way everybody embraced the religion. I mean, now we all like our parents transferred the religion to us, but in the past, it's really unthinkable to think that someone just comes out of nowhere and just present a religion for you, and you're just going to embrace it. It's
yeah, this is what actually happened. Actual history, African people were forced to convert to Islam at sword point. That actually transpired.
That didn't transpire, did it?
It did transpire.
Because here's the thing. If it transpired, then how on earth are there Coptic Christians still living in Egypt?
I'm so glad. Hold on. You asked a question. I'm going to answer it. And I'm so glad that you answered that. You asked that question because during that time, if you were not Muslim, you had to pay what? A tax. You had to pay higher taxes, paying for protection due to the fact that you were not a Muslim.
Yeah, everyone pays tax. Muslims pay tax.
No. See, you keep trying to move the goalposts.
No. They did. They did.
You can't overtalk me on my platform. You can't do that.
Hey, you gotta pay a special tax for being a non-Muslim.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Zongo.
You gotta pay a special tax.
Yeah, you did. You had to pay a special tax along with the taxes you were already paying to pay for protection based on the fact that you weren't a Muslim. And if you didn't pay that tax, you could be killed. They would rape your wife and children. These are things that actually happened under Islamic rule, particularly the Ottoman Empire.
Right. So now here's the situation. If you are paying the jizya, that's what it was called. It was called a jizya.
Yeah, jizya.
If you calculate the jizya, it was lower than the taxes that the Muslims had to pay.
It was not. It was not lower. It was higher.
I mean, there's no.
Hold on. Wait.
It was lower.
Wait. No, stop.
I'm trying to speak to you. I'm just saying, like, it shouldn't have to.
No. I got this. I got this. I said it at the top of my show that one of the core rules here at Lumumba Speaks and Be Quran Network is we do not allow people to make claims that are patently false. The claim that you made, Brother Jay, I'm sorry, is adverse to the facts. That's just the reality. We've gone over this. I've sent you literature. You provided your email. I sent you literature on anti-Blackness in Islam. You refused to read it. Don't know why you refused to read it. Quite frankly, that's not my concern, right? However, you cannot come. Hold on up. Nope. You cannot come on my platform and make claims that are patently false and ahistorical. I don't allow that, irrespective of who the person is. I've had my sister on my platform. I've had my cousins on my platform. My parents may even come on my platform one day. If they made a claim that's ahistorical, I would say, listen, I'm going to turn into the brother at the Apollo and boot you off the stage. So I'm making that very clear before we continue this conversation. Ashe, Black Power. Brother Zongo, go right ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying that there's no need for him trying to rationalize why non-Muslims had to pay like the jizya. I mean, quite recently, if you remember, even in Egypt, actually, I mean, the deposed president Morsi, he wanted the non-Muslims to actually pay jizya too in modern era. That was completely preposterous, actually. You know, so there's no point in trying to rationalize that.
Understood.
Lumumba Speaks. Can I ask you a question, brother?
Please, yes, you can.
So you're saying that the information I have about the jizya is wrong. Okay. So can you calculate per annum how much the non-Muslims were charged the jizya?
I mean, let's not play semantics on this, man.
I'm not playing semantics on it. I mean, I need clarification.
Well, once again, brother, I sent you literature on this subject matter. If you didn't read it, I can't help you.
I mean, what it was is
they were required to pay that because first of all, like the non-Muslims were not allowed to join the military of the Muslims, right? So
No, had to
they were,
join. They did join.
they were required to pay that as a protection given to them by the Muslim army. I mean, come on, man! Like,
No, I mean, I'll admit to this thing. All right?
imagine living in a society and being a minority and being treated like that. I mean, come on, man.
All right.
That's
Now, what I will concede to is that it was optional for them to join the army. They didn't have to join the army, whereas the Muslims, they had to join the army in order to protect their land and in order to
Well,
expand.
in some instances, in some situations, black men, African men, were actually enslaved as mercenaries, even if they weren't Muslim.
yeah,
I mean,
but I wanted to ask
they
you.
actually were, enslaved as mercenaries, and they were considered expendable in war.
Yeah, I wanted to ask him why he chose, like, especially, like, I mean, if you recall quite vividly, what happened in Syria. I mean, Jay. I wanted to ask Jay in Syria regarding like the ones who wanted to create the. I mean, I wouldn't say even say like even in Syria, like the uprising over there. Because I mean, imagine just going to Syria. Like, how would you know like who is who? Who's the non-Muslim? I mean, for you being an African is very like is visually recognizable. It's just easy for someone to just kill you. They wouldn't know if you're a Muslim or not. So you gotta be very mindful with the way that's why I'm saying that you have to recognize your Africanness while you practice you can't just follow the religion blindly. If it's like a war between the Arabs and yourself, and these are light-skinned Arabs, you just can't follow them like that. Someone might kill you thinking you are the enemy.
The Islamic religion is not an Arabic religion. Right?
Well, it's not an Arabic religion. However, it was codified and, of course, collated by Arabs, and so we see a very strong Arab influence in the Islamic faith. For example, the fact that, of course, the Quran was written in Arabic, right? The
Yeah,
belief that
yeah, yeah.
the belief that part of that is what that you need to pray in Arabic. You must recite the Quran in Arabic. You must turn towards Arabia, right, to pray. The fact that when you die in Islam, the belief is that when you die, everyone will speak Arabic. So this shows the strong Arabic influence on the Islamic faith.
Yeah, it's there's Arabic linguistics that's 100% correct. But the biggest opposition to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, were Arabs. Arabs did everything.
Once again, that's not our concern. But this is an African
I
center.
know,
This is an
I know.
African center discussion.
Yeah, about Lamua, in all honesty, right? Even though I do recognize that Prophet Muhammad came from an Arabic culture, right? But more precisely, I think it's more like his culture. It's something that he created from it's like a new religion within the existing Arabic culture at that time.
Yeah,
Just to give some kind of clarity
No,
on that.
I get all of that.
Yeah.
Once again, on this show, we have African-centered critiques, but we're gonna Sister Michelle join, also known as Pro Woman. We're doing a show on Sunday based on the conversation we had last Sunday, and that show is titled "Does Higher Education Matter for the Black Community?" So that's a conversation I definitely think you should want to tap in on based on the conversation we had last Sunday. But Sister Joyner, Pro Woman, prolific, professional, proactive. What say you?
Hi, fellas. Hi, chat. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for platform.
well, how you doing?
I'll definitely try to tap in to that one on Sunday. I have some stuff prepared I want to talk about. I have a little paper that I found that Martin Luther King wrote on education for my Black Studies class back in 2017. So, yeah, I'll definitely plan on tapping in on that. Let me just say briefly, I put some links in the chat to people who are products either of the Nation of Islam directly under Minister Farrakhan, the Nation of Islam.
We don't have any links from you. Only I got as a comment, being Black African comes first. That's it.
Oh, wow. You guys, I see it in mine. You guys don't have those links?
Nope.
Wow. Why would that be? I see it in my thing. Why would I post links and they not show up?
I have no idea. Did you post it on YouTube or did you post it here in StreamYard?
On YouTube.
So that may be the issue. Let me go on here and see what you put on YouTube. I'm still not seeing it.
So you don't see where I have product of the NOI prison
Okay,
ministry?
I see founder of Wallace Muhammad Sharif, founder of We Buy Black, largest platform for Black-owned products, do for self and action. I see that comment.
Okay, and I put a couple of other ones in there. Before that, I even put the next lecture that NOI has on their platform, Evil Accidents of Time. And it should be interesting. You see that?
You said evil what?
Evil Accidents of Time.
I didn't see that, but
Anybody else see that? Because I'm wondering if my chats are not, if my posts are not posting. I wonder why. Anyway, maybe I'll go back and put them in or something, but I put in 3 examples of, I think, Black people who have come from the Nation of Islam and maybe even by extension, Elijah Muhammad's teachings, who are putting Black first. George Macon, who is
well, very quickly, sister. The question is, what comes first, being Muslim or African?
Well, I was trying to explain how those brothers are putting Black first, even though
I didn't say Black. I said African.
Or African. So they're putting their Black African people first, despite being Muslim or a product of the Nation of Islam's prison ministry, like George Macon, who's not Muslim. I think he maybe professes Christianity more than anything, or just spirituality, or a moral system, or a moral code. But he's definitely putting Black African people first. So I don't know if those links are showing up or not, but I just wanted to point out that those are 3 examples of, even after 100 or so years, you have Elijah Muhammad's teachings still living on. And also Sharif Abdul Malik, he's a follower either of Wallace, not Wallace or Silas, because there are actually a few different Nation of Islams. Minister Farrakhan is just the most popular Nation of Islam. Correct. But after Elijah Muhammad died, several ministers, the Nation of Islam splintered. Correct. Each version of the nation claiming that they have the true teachings of Elijah Muhammad. Correct. I think Silas's Nation of Islam is even called the Lost Found Nation of Islam.
I'm familiar.
Yeah, so I just wanted to put those examples in there, since I see that this was the topic of what comes first, being Muslim or African, of those 3 brothers who are, a couple of whom who are Muslim, putting Africans first. And Abdul Muhammad, if anyone wants to go to the link, I don't know if it shows up in there, about justice for, he is a brother, as Lumumba speaks, as Bakari has pointed out, that when you've done any real work in the community, you're going to run into the people from the Nation of Islam. And one of those people you may run into would be somebody like Abdul Muhammad, who was an excellent principal at Lindblom High School here in Chicago. Some white teachers got together, colluded to get him fired. And he has a whole platform, a whole page where you can go and support and find out more about the issue, called Justice for Abdul Muhammad. So that's just an example of the Nation of Islam people at their best. When they're at their best and they're in the community, they're putting Black African first, even above being Muslim. However,
now hold on now putting up there. Now see, you were cooking were cooking at the barbecue, and I was eating it all up. I actually asked for seconds. Okay, but now no, in the Nation of Islam, what is preeminent is being Muslim. And I know this now. Hold on, I know this not only because I frequent their meetings, also because I actually have, drum roll please, the teachings of Elijah Muhammad right here, the Supreme Wisdom Lessons by Master W.D. Farad Muhammad to his servant, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So I actually have the teachings right here. So there may be a Black-centered ethos, but the teachings promotes first and foremost being Muslim first. I know this because I've gone through dozens in the Nation of Islam meetings. study groups, the whole nine. So I know this because this is what it said in the study groups in the meetings.
But Lumumba, I have a question for you.
I've been in several study groups and meetings too, but
I have a question.
All right, so who has the question?
Me, actually.
Okay, Zongo. Okay.
Because the thing is, I think the topic in itself, I think, is inaccurate. Because I mean, how can you compare someone's Africanness with the faith?
Well, I'm so glad that you asked that question. So one, this is the 3-part series. We've done a 3-part series on Inside the Nation of Islam, called the community. The first part is we talk in general about the Nation of Islam, the history of the organization, and some of the nefarious activities that have taken place in the organization. Second, we looked at exclusively at the teachings of the Nation of Islam, that were rather charismatic and, of course, ahistorical in nature. And then third, of course, we're talking about from a Pan-Africanist perspective, in the ideology of Pan-Africanism, one's African identity, or as Sister Joyner would like to use the term Black, as we could use them, interchangeably, is preeminent to any other identity. And so being African or being Black is your most salient identity, right? And so that is, of course, one of the core tenets of Pan-Africanism. And that's why we're having this conversation this evening.
Because if you look at like Nation of Islam in America historically, the way racially they were mostly Black people, but the way they saw the faith of Islam, I feel like it's like, just to draw some kind of a parallel with computer, like the people were the computer, but the software is the faith, right? And to them, Islam, Black identity was almost the same thing to them before they got. I mean, from my understanding, it seems to me historically, the Nation of Islam view is Islam as a faith to help their people. I mean, because they it was like a Black faith to them, if I can be just precise, because they didn't see any other groups as part of that religion, because they used to demonize white people as being devils by that faith. So you can also argue how Nation of Islam started historically, that the faith was a Black faith, an African faith in Americas.
Okay, I don't get the point you're trying to make.
The point I'm trying to make is the topic saying being Muslim or African, which comes first. And I'm saying,
I think I might be able to explain it. So I think the issue here is if you believe that there's a God, if you truly believe that there's a God, then you'll be a fool to take a people over the most powerful thing in the universe, right? So it's just common sense to say I would choose a God over people, even if the people look like me. Now, in the Holy Bible,
I would say that's common sense, because some of the greatest leaders that African people have ever had were what they put their African identity superseded any religious belief.
No, see, that's the thing. I didn't say religion. I said God. So if you believe that there's a higher power that created everything,
but once again,
you'll be a fool.
Once again, you're moving the goalposts. But you're becoming you're diluting.
Well, here
we're not talking about God. We're talking about the Nation of Islam, and a byproduct. We're talking about Islam.
So Lumumba, I was going to get to the bottom of that though. So, and I don't know about the in the Holy Quran, but I know that in the Bible, the word religion isn't even brought up. The word isn't the religion. Something like a religion is man-made. It's basically just a culture. So what happens is, if you follow the Holy Quran or the Holy Bible and you think that those books are consecrated and it's the truth of the Word of God, then you create a religion or a culture based on the tenets of those scriptures or those books, right? So the thing is,
so Lumumba, you mean to tell me the Nation of Islam, during its inception, they had a confusion regarding their racial identity, like being an African, like the Africanness?
Well, once again, maybe I don't know if you're being obtuse or if you just weren't listening, but I talked about earlier in the show that Elijah Muhammad in his book the fall of America, stated that the only civilized people in Africa were Christians and Muslims. He actually states this in his book, right? The Nation of Islam has a very has a history of having negative views of African people. The Nation of Islam actually teach that Black people were originally light skinned with straight hair, with straight hair, and that part of the reason why Black people are dark skinned today is because they turned against what the will of God and they run into the jungles, so on and so forth. So these are some of the actual teachings of the
really? Oh, really? Oh my God. Okay, my bad. My bad. I mean, that's fine.
So once again, I don't want to argue these points. Please go back and look at part 1 and part 2 of the show where I'm reading from the text, right? Right. I engaged in this. I read from the text. Part 1 and part 2 is on the channel, but I don't want to have to re-legislate these issues that we already addressed in part 1 and part 2 of the series.
Can I chime in real quick and make a point or two?
Yes.
Yes.
I think the real issue here is what was stated earlier. What would you put first, your Africanness or your religion? No one is saying you can't practice any religion that you want, because you can. If you choose to practice a certain religion, whether it's Christianity, Catholicism, Islam, that's fine. But there needs to be a point where you put your African identity above your religion at some point, because that's what you are. And another thing, what I don't hear being discussed, well, Lumumba, you brought it up before, but the history of how these Abrahamic religions came to African people. And I'm still confused on why someone, knowing the history of these languages, or excuse me, these religions, will put that over their own African identity unless you were working against your own people. That doesn't make any sense to me. That's like saying you're friends with somebody, okay, but you would take that friend side against someone in your own family if there was an argument or a fight. Most people would take their family side, right? Because your family has precedence over someone that's your friend, because that's your actual bloodline, whether they're right or wrong, right? So there's no way anyone could tell me you as an African person of African descent can be the exact same as someone that is Arab or a white Caucasian person from Europe or America or whatever the case may be. There's no way you could tell me you're the exact same as those people. And if you look at the history of these religions, they have a history of oppressing us, exploiting us, colonizing us. I mean, we could talk about this trans-Saharan slave trade that was before the transatlantic slave trade, right?
Yeah, but no.
See, the thing is, I think
not all cultures within the continent were influenced.
What's that?
Islam. I said not all cultures within the continent of Africa were strongly influenced by Islam. So some would argue that some were influenced and others were not. So once again,
Islam.
Wait. That has nothing to do with what he just said. He's not talking about Islamic influence of different cultures, right? He talked about what you just talked about, the transatlantic slave trade and the history of anti-blackness and the Islamic religion. Am I correct? Am I right or wrong, Mr. Wright?
Yes.
Right. So we're not
that's cool.
This keeps happening when we have these conversations. People keep moving the goalposts and try to bring up something else. Well, what about this? We don't do whataboutism here. We're going to stay on point like Stacey Adams. Okay.
It's just like a vague question, because
let me get some clarity.
What is Africanness? Is Africanness a culture?
No, we're talking about in terms of one's identity.
That's what I want to ask. What is Africanness? What does that mean?
So you're saying, do you pick your race over a religion?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, because there's several different cultures in Africa.
There isn't one unanimous. There isn't one unanimous.
Wait, Mr. Zongo, go right ahead.
There isn't one. There isn't a unanimous African identity. I mean,
no, I never said there was.
So, like, if someone identified it, let's say if someone was.
So let me ask you this question: are you familiar with what Pan-Africanism is?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I just
Could
like
you
it's
could you
like,
give
like
could
a,
you give could you briefly give me a working definition of what Pan Africanism? Of what I'm sorry. Can you briefly give me some of the core tenets of Pan Africanism?
I mean, I would say black liberation, um, economic emancipation of the
Economic what?
like I would say like I would say against imperialism,
Okay,
uh,
so
promote
anti-imperialism. Okay,
promote economic cooperation among African people,
okay,
unity among African black African people,
uh-huh.
and among others, pretty much. I mean,
Okay. Seems like you struggle there a bit. But the preeminent tenet of Pan Africanism that comes first before anything else is that one's African identity is their most salient identity. And if you and this go
Yeah.
and this isn't my perspective, right? As you can see, I have a litany of books on the history of Pan Africanism, so we could go all the way back to some of the earliest writings by Pan
yeah, but
Africanism.
Lumumba, I
You
read
can't cut me
Garvey's
off on my platform. That's just not going to happen.
Can I just come
You
in
can't
here?
overtalk me on my platform. That's just you can say, hey, I got a question, but you can't overtalk me on my platform. I want to be able to make my point that the earliest Pan Africanist written manifesto, David Walker's Appeal, written in 1829, of course, promoted these core concepts and tenets of one's African identity is preeminent, right? And so we find this with the writings of course, Marcus Garvey. We find this with Kwame Nkrumah. We find this with many of the greatest Pan Africanists that ever lived. Even one many would argue, Yaa Santawa, and some of the work that she did, right, was focused on this concept of one's African identity being what is most salient.
Yeah, but people also argue that Pan Africanism was against African culture too.
How so?
I mean, it means you have to do away with your existing culture in order to unite the whole of African people.
I've never no that is not a tenet of Pan Africanism.
Can I just basically
Sister Joy, you're going to pro woman, prolific, pro life, professional. You're next.
Okay.
Jay, go right ahead.
basically my perspective is this. I want the very best for the people of Africa, okay?
I'm sorry?
Now, I want the very best for the
Okay.
people of Africa. That's firstly, okay? Now, when I look to a country like China, I see China is relatively successful. Now, Mao Zedong came to China. Now, he was a Chinese man, and he used a foreign ideology known as communism in order to help develop and move the country forward. Now, he didn't say to himself, "Oh my God, you know that Joseph Stalin and this communism, it really has a bad track record." What he did is he learned from the values and the principles of communism and he applied it. Then came along a man called Deng Xiaoping. Deng Xiaoping used free market capitalism as a way to bankroll the communist Chinese ideology. Now people are condemning Deng Xiaoping and thinking, hold on a minute, why would you use this this ideology from white supremacists that has enslaved the entire world? Why would you use this in order to help the Chinese? And he said, listen, at the end of the day, I'm concerned about making China better. So what he did is he focused upon the values, the concepts, the ideas of Marxism and free market capitalism in order to ask himself, how can we unify the Chinese people? How can we move them forward? He left behind all the culture of the Qing dynasty, the Ming dynasty. He just left that behind and used modern communism and free market capitalism to move forward. Now, what I'm saying with Africa, we have to do whatever it takes to bring Africa to the level of Wakanda, to the level of Mansa Musa's Mali. We need to bring it to that level. I'm willing to apply Christianity, socialism, Islam, communism, any way of life that will help us move forward, even Pan-Africanism. I don't care. I'm looking at how is Africa gonna get out of the disastrous, most horrific situation that it's in. We need solutions. Now you talk about, oh yeah, the Muslims, they did some bad things to us. Africans have been doing some pretty bad and wicked things to themselves. They've been enslaving themselves. They've been
Well, so
committing genocide
I'm
against
going to
themselves.
stop. I'm going to stop you right there. One, and this happens a lot when people are apologists for Christian, even Islamic enslavement of African people. They bring up African people enslaving African people. Unfortunately, that is true, but there is a big stark difference between chattel enslavement, the complete dehumanization of a person, and the type of African enslavement that was taking place in traditional African cultures, where people were treated like human beings, subjects were treated like human beings, and then of course there was even opportunities for those individuals to rise up not only in the family, become members of the family, but also do what? Become leaders in society, right? So those are two different things. The other issue is that what we find is that yes, you can use different concepts and ideas to promote a nation state, right? You talk about communism and capitalism. We're talking about, of course, the political economy, right? What we're speaking to is the adverse effect that these alien religions, particularly in terms of this case, Islam, have on not only African people's identity, but our cultural way of being, right? And so this is something that we're covering. But pro-woman, pro-life, prolific, professional, go right ahead.
Yeah, I'll be brief and I'm gonna jump off. I make the point, you refute my point, and then you cut me off, and I can't even address the point that I made. I even forget what I was making. Let me just speak to this briefly about the whole these religions, that you cannot be pro-black or pro-African, pan-African, and be a Christian or Muslim or any of these other kinds of religions. Yeah, you kind of can. I gave examples in the chat of three brothers who were putting black first, despite them being Muslim, or African first, black, despite them being Muslim. My concern right now is not to get everybody away from their particular religion as much as finding the nugget or the kernel of a common concern of them wanting to see power, peace, freedom, and justice for African people within that religion. One could argue that it was African chiefs who traded us over here who had their traditional African religion. What remains of traditional African religion now, there's a lot good in it, but there's also some superstition and mystical.
Oh yeah, but you have superstition and mysticism and mythology in all religions.
And correct, in all of them. So to say that only traditional African religion is the only freedom-minded religion that
no one ever made that claim.
Okay, well, so I'm just clearing it up now then. So we're going to be able to come at this thing from many different faiths, as long as we have that common kernel and nugget within of wanting to be free and sovereign and people who receive justice, despite whatever faith that they are in. So that is how I'm going to be moving in a polarized world today. I'm not really going to be interested in talking people out of their Muslimness, their Christianity.
No, yeah, right. Well, the goal isn't to disabuse. Once again, this is about having, for example, we talk about Black studies. When you take Black studies, this is probably the only time in a person's life where they will be educated from a pedagogical approach that is African-centered. Right? Typically, we grow up, we receive a Eurocentric education paradigm, Eurocentric paradigm of education, a Christian paradigm of education, or a Muslim paradigm of education. We never receive an African-centered paradigm of education. Now, I'm not original in this position. Dr. Carter Jewison made this claim 91 years ago in his book, Miseducation of the Negro. And so he talked about that this causes African people to hate themselves and to pedestalize other peoples and their cultures. So this is an issue. Now, if we're talking about being unapologetically African, it's impossible to be unapologetically African wholly and completely if you're practicing Abrahamic religion, because those faiths seek to what? Replace one's own culture. Dr. Ali Mazrui talks about this in his book, The Africans of Triple Heritage, that was written in 1986. Right? Dr. Ali Mazrui was the former head of Black Studies or African-American Studies at the University of Michigan. You know, being an Ohio State fan, I call it the University of Michigan. But that's a conversation for another day, because we're going to take care of business on November 30th, right? So, but he gives detailed examples of how these religions seek to what? Replace the African culture. He talks about in Christianity, instead of having an African naming ceremony, you have a christening, right? He talked about in Islam that there are certain practices in terms of the Arabic language being preeminent, the fact that alcohol being considered haram, the fact that, you know, getting tattoos, which is part of traditional African culture, rite of passage, is considered a sin, right? So, I mean, he goes through a number of examples, I think in like chapter 6 of the book, which I actually have sitting up here behind me. So if we're talking about culturally, because, you know, Malcolm talked about, and several scholars talked about, there has to be a cultural revolution before a what? Political revolution, right? We still find people coping with this concept of internalized anti-Blackness based on the practicing or following of these alien faiths.
I would say this. First, I would say Lumumba is a PhD candidate going to be doing his dissertation defense in a couple of weeks. So he's speaking on his area of expertise. He's speaking on things that he has been eating, sleeping, and breathing for the past 10 years. So those of us on the panel who I think many of us can put up a cogent argument, we may not be able to reference as much from history and scholarship and name specific books and all that sort of thing. That doesn't discount the legitimacy of our arguments. I contend that you can be a Christian. Many of our greatest freedom fighters have been Christians.
Right, but they also struggle with internalized anti-Blackness.
If it didn't
I
get in
don't
the
struggle.
way, we all still have a struggle. Traditional African religions, they may struggle with mysticism versus practicality.
But once again, you can't overtalk me. You can't overtalk me. You're moving the goalposts. We're not talking about mysticism and practicality.
We're talking about things that get in the way.
We're talking about anti-Blackness.
Brother Lumumba, can I just say something?
So you're moving the goalposts. I thought we were talking about things that get in the way.
No.
Brother Lumumba.
And I'm very clear on this, right? And I've done this on several occasions, right? When we've had these conversations, we're talking about anti-Blackness. We're not talking about mysticism. We're not talking about practicality. We're not talking about African enslavement of African people. We're talking about anti-Blackness in the Islamic religion. That's what we're talking about. And everybody keeps trying to extrapolate other issues into the conversation. That's not what we're talking about.
That is what we're talking about. We're talking about
no. Once again, this is my platform.
What do you mean?
I decide what the conversation is about. And I've done this.
Please, can I say that?
Do you mean anti-Black culture?
You can't overtalk me. If you look at the title of the show, it's very clear what this conversation is about. The conversation is not about mysticism and practicality and African religions. I've done shows on that before, but that is the show that we're doing tonight.
Do you mean when you say anti-Blackness? Do you mean anti-Black culture? Is that what you mean precisely?
No, in terms of anti-Blackness, we're talking about the history of anti-Black racism in the Islamic faith.
Oh, so the religion itself is racist? Is that what you're saying?
No, once again, I said I'm talking about the history of anti-Black racism in the Islamic faith. There's a large amount of scholarship on anti-Blackness in Islam from its inception. Once again, I can give you some of the literature. You can read the literature, peer-reviewed scholarly literature that provides what? Primary and secondary sources that are verifiable. Then maybe we could come back and revisit this conversation.
We got some street scholars though.
Right, I'm not into liquor store scholarship. You know that.
Yeah, but I don't think the faith.
Remember.
Yes, go ahead, Jay.
Yes, so basically, with me, even though I earlier said that if it came between Africans and Islam, you know, the Islamic faith would have to take precedence because I'm concerned about my afterlife. But I do not believe myself that I'm anti-African.
I never said that you were.
All right, because you might say, you know, so thankfully, you know, if you think, I mean, the Islamic religion has never imparted upon me an anti-African bent in any way whatsoever. You know, the religion itself is not anti-Black, it's not anti-African.
Well, it has a virulent history of anti-Blackness. That is a historical fact. You cannot disabuse me of that fact. because it is
Okay.
actually true.
Now, when reading over some parts of the literature,
prophet,
you know,
they have
you,
like a
you
companion.
know,
Yeah, and this is something that's happened because you did this on the last show where you tend to make apology. You seem to be an anti-black Islamic apologist, where you tend
I'm
to
not
make
anti-black.
excuses
I mean,
for the crimes against African people under the name of Islam.
yeah, but there's a distinction. Wait, Jay, wait, Jay, wait. We have to draw a distinction between the practices of Muslim and what the religion as an ideologue states. Is there any verses in the Quran that the religion is strictly against black people?
Well, I mean, there are some verses in the Quran and Hadith that we've covered once again on previous shows. Because, like I said, I'm not going to re-legislate this, right? What you
No,
can do
really.
is go back.
No, it's not. It's
Pull it
not against black
out.
people.
Pull it out another time.
Can't do that.
Yeah, but it's not against black people.
Once again, as I stated before.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying.
Once again, so you keep trying to overtalk me. When you ask me a question, I start to answer you. You can't overtalk me on my platform. It doesn't work that way, right? Once again,
is this a conversation or a dictatorship? What's up?
Once again, we can have a conversation, but you can't overtalk me on my platform. When I go on other people's platforms, I don't overtalk them. When they say, "Hey, stop," I stop.
Yeah, but we came to support your show. You have to give us
off
a
when they
chance
can't
to
finish
express
their
our thoughts.
But once again, as I stated, I don't allow
Well,
people. I have ground rules on my show. I don't allow people to make claims that are patently false. I stated at the beginning, if you make a claim that is ahistorical, that is averse to the facts, I will cut you off. I make that very clear every show at the beginning. I've been doing this. I've been doing for 4 years.
Remember, all right.
I mean,
when I
wait, Jay, wait.
Discounting people's opinions. You again. You will be able to have more facts, more information, and more scholarship. How we have come to our opinion is valid for us, especially if we can offer some evidence. We might not have as much as you have because we haven't been eating, sleeping, and drinking. We have come to an understanding based on some evidence.
There's a lot of verses. There's a lot of verses that says the religion is for all of mankind. I mean, why would you say it was strictly against black people?
Once again, you're speaking about Islam in writing, and I'm speaking about Islam in practice.
I mean, that's what I'm saying.
No, I mean, so for example, I would give you an example. We know the Constitution. Hold on, the Constitution of the United States Constitution states that what, but everyone, it has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what the Constitution says in writing. But in practice, we know that's not the case.
But I mean, so what are we arguing? That's why I'm arguing. Like, are you arguing like by the practice of Muslim or what the religion as an ideology states? You know.
Well, actually, both. You actually find both, right? But once again, there is.
The same thing applies. The same thing could also apply. The same thing could also be argued that the Muslims, the ones who brought religion in West Africa, were Africans themselves too.
Well, Islam came to West Africa via trade from the East.
Yes, but
the trade came via the East by whom? Arabs.
But I'm saying the Africans who embraced the religion later, converted other Africans into Islam.
Yes, right, and this is something that happens when people convert to religion. They tend to
say like the blacks.
Whoa. This is what happens when people convert to a religion. They tend to proselytize. That is a reality.
But I'm saying, I'm going to argue that the blacks who are converted, all the blacks too, were anti-black too as well.
Well, what we do find is it did create some issues because as a result, the blacks, the African people, and we're talking about in medieval West Africa, when they converted to Islam, they then would only buy, sell, and trade with other Muslims, what is considered the Ummah, right? Rather than African people who.
I mean, what is wrong in just practicing just among Muslims? What is wrong in that? There's nothing wrong.
Once again, now it's creating a schism between their own brothers and sisters.
They view themselves as a nation. No, because like ideology is no different from a nationhood or something like that. It's no different from that, actually.
It's much different.
I mean, because Islam kind of also view themselves as a nation as well. You hear a lot of them saying the Muslim Ummah is a nation.
Actually. Oh, all right, Mr. Wright, go right ahead.
Zongo and Jay, may I ask you two a question? Do you feel like you're the exact same as someone that is Arab?
No, I don't believe I'm.
I didn't hear what you said. Can you repeat your question again?
Okay. I said, or do you feel that you are the exact same ethnically as someone that is Arabic?
No,
No.
I'm ethnically
Okay.
the same as someone that's African.
I have a question too, if you don't mind. So everyone agrees that all of mankind started in Africa, right?
Well, actually,
Yeah.
according to very quickly, according to Abrahamic religions, humanity began in the Middle East. Actually, what the Fertile Crescent, known as Mesopotamia, which is present day Iraq. So,
Yeah.
according to Abrahamic religions, humanity began in Asia, not Africa.
So technically, if all human beings come from Africa, then all human beings are African, right?
No, no. What you're referring to and what you're conflating is you're conflating Homo erectus with Homo sapiens sapiens. For example, we having this conversation today right now are Homo sapiens sapiens. What you're referring to is what is considered as Homo erectus. This is when human beings began to what simply walk on two legs.
Oh, okay. So you saying that the other races in the world aren't Homo sapiens?
No.
Yeah,
So what I'm referring to is when we talk about the birthplace of humanity being Africa, right? What we're talking about is at the time when humanity began in the world, the people were considered Homo erectus. Later,
that's what I'm trying to
right,
understand.
we
Where
were
is
able to develop
Africa?
high level brain activity, develop culture. We went from Homo erectus to Homo sapien to what we are now today, Homo sapien sapien. This is just simple evolution, was
Yeah.
what I'm
So
talking about.
all human beings are Homo
Yeah, I
sapiens.
mean, there's no
They
like.
just the white
Well,
people and the
what I'm
Arabs are the
speaking
Homo
to, once again,
sapiens
what I'm
that
speaking
went
to is,
east, and we're the Homo sapiens that went west, right?
what I'm speaking to is at the time when humanity began, we weren't Homo sapiens. We were simply Homo erectus.
Yeah, but we didn't leave Africa until we became Homo sapiens.
No, we left Africa. People left Africa when they were Homo erectus.
Yeah, but they were Homo erectus, but those different breeds of humanoid species died off, like the Neanderthal and the Denisovian.
Yeah, we don't want to deflect to discuss about Neanderthals. Let's stick to the topic of today.
Yeah, but once again, as you stated, in Abrahamic religions, the belief that according to the text, humanity began in Asia, not Africa. According to the text. As a matter of fact, there was a
No,
sister that
really,
there was a
no,
sister that
no.
I'm very cool with, and
Islam
we
is
actually had
listen,
that conversation. I actually had to read the text for herself, and she was puzzled for like an hour. Like, I can't believe I never realized this.
no.
So
There's
yes,
no
we
like
know that.
Islam.
Hold on. We know that, of course, humanity began in Africa, but according once again to the Abrahamic faith, right? Religion. I mean, not religion. Humanity began in Asia, not Africa.
I mean, I don't.
Yeah, so that's a false. That's
Islam never.
false then.
I'm
No,
sorry. What's false?
That it began in Asia.
I know, but
yeah,
that's what the text says.
yeah, but I mean,
Yeah, but we
Islam is
all
also
know
part
that
of
not
like Islam
everything
is
in the
also
What does
part
it
of
say
in the
the
that
Bible is
in the
correct.
Quran? What does it say that
Islam.
in the Quran?
Islam is also part of the Abrahamic religion, but it never said emphatically in the Quran where
He
humanity
didn't
began.
say that, did he?
It
Well,
never
What does it
said.
say that in the Quran?
I'm citing, of course, I'm citing the Torah. So we know, of course,
Oh, okay.
In Islam, you accept all of the books, all of the
Yeah,
prophets.
but they don't.
Right?
No,
Hold
no,
on,
Yeah,
no.
no.
wait.
Let's give
We
clarity.
accept
Let's give
all of the
clarity.
prophets.
No,
And so
let's
as
give.
we
Clarify.
all,
Yeah, but let's
Oh,
give clarity.
clarify.
Let's give clarity. Islamic people do believe in all the books, but they don't believe in the current version. They don't trust the current version. They
okay,
believe it has been
that's
adopted.
great. However, once again, in the text, this is what it claims. This is what it says.
Yeah, so if they don't believe it, you just don't.
But that's not in the Quran, though.
Well, okay, I didn't say it was in the Quran. And I
Okay,
said
okay, cool, cool, cool.
Abrahamic. I said Abraham. I did not exclusively say Islam. I said
Yeah,
Abrahamic.
but I'm just saying Islam never is part of the Abrahamic faith, but they never like say where humanity actually started
Okay,
from.
but I'm telling you what the text actually says.
Oh, okay.
So
I'm,
I don't understand why you're trying to debate something that's factual. The Torah states that humanity. Stop! You can't overtalk me. The Torah states that humanity began in Asia. It states that the Garden of Eden was located between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers are in present-day Iraq. This is irrefutable. You can read the damn text yourself. So I don't know why you all keep trying to argue about something that's
I
factual.
mean, the point I'm trying to say, you made mention of Abrahamic faith, and Islam is part of the Abrahamic faith. And I'm just trying to point out that Islam does not say emphatically that humanity began over there. I'm just highlighting the difference, disparity. That's all.
Yeah, there's difference.
Very good. Any last thoughts before we close out?
Yeah. So basically, I was reading some aspects of the literature that you put forward. I didn't read it all. Now, basically, I was just constantly asking myself the question: what times, what dates did these slave trades take place?
Well, you need to read the text in its entirety.
I referred to other other texts and
No. You need to read the text that I sent you in its entirety, and then you will be able to answer that question.
But here's the issue: there's only two incidences where the slave trade was happening where Africa was concerned. You had the Sahel slave trade, and then you also had the slave trade in regards to the Indian Ocean slave trade. Those are the two instances that other than that, there were no other incidences after that now.
And you had the transatlantic slave trade.
But that was not the Muslims. That was some Christians.
Okay, what's your point, man?
So my point is, those two slave trades, they were not initiated by the Muslims. They were initiated by others. And then the Muslims just carried it on, but they weren't initiated by the Muslim community. So basically, when the Egyptians, they tried to fight Nubia, and they failed to win against Nubia, then they lost the war. And as a peace offering, the Nubians gave the Muslims, the Arabs, their slaves. And then the Indian Ocean slave trade, that began with the Persians.
Brother, you're promoting misinformation. Once again, I do not allow people to make claims on my platform.
No, that's not.
I've told you that 1,000 times. I've sent you peer-reviewed scholarly literature on the history of the.
Yeah, but it's not direct. This
stop of the Islamic enslavement of African people. You said you read some of the literature, but not all of it. So what I'm going to have to do is ask you to read all of the literature in its entirety, and then, of course, then we could come back and have this conversation. But I'm going to close the show out. Until next time, family, you all know what to do. Always bet on Black. Peace.